First of all, thank you for staying until the end of the conference, I think, right? So, yep. So I will talk today about this idea of model selection, of how can you, if you have more than one model or one of more explanations of some archaeological process, how can you actually compare them using simulation and statistics and try to get a better idea of what's going on. So this work, I've done this work with my colleague Rins Villet from Leiden University. And okay, I would like to start with, let's say, the ideal world where all of us try to live when we create a simulation, which is this idea that you have some knowledge and some data of a problem, and then you get or you define a research question that you want to answer. Usually what you do using model-based archaeology is to create a model and design an experiment to, in some way, fit this model or try to use the model to understand the data. Okay? So in the end, what you are doing in some way is trying to validate your model against the data and see if it works. It's an explanation transferred to mathematical language, so if it sort of it's validated, it means that it's a good explanation of the archaeological, of the pattern expressed in the archaeological record. The problem is when you try to define what is validation, because there are a set of issues that are quite important. One of them is equifinality, which is the idea that maybe your explanation is good, but maybe there's other explanations for the same data, the same evidence. And the problem is that we have data with so much uncertainty that maybe we cannot decide which one is better than the other one. So in the end, you just got a good explanation, not the explanation. The second one is that there's the issue of parsimony. So maybe your model is super detailed and fits perfectly the data. It's a perfect match. But is it a good model? Because obviously with a lot of parameters you can fit the data very well. It doesn't mean, if you think about not only uncertainty, but also the complexities of analyzing the model, maybe it's not a good model, even if it's fitting the data. So is this model validated? And finally, the thing that I think is more important is we talk about matching the evidence with the model. What does it mean? I mean, the evidence, it's implied that you probably quantify the distance between the outcome of your model and the evidence. So, okay, if the distance is 1 or 0, what does it mean? So if it's 0, you have the perfect explanation or not. So in the end, the problem is validation possible? And I like this quote that I think it's quite applicable to the whole session because we got a lot of amazing negative results this morning. And this quote says something like, we have two possible outcomes, so if we confirm the hypothesis, what we got is a measurement. If we don't do that, what we've got is knowledge, it's a discovery, right? So I want to put the focus on the measurement thing, because in the end it's giving us information about the model and the data. Instead of trying to validate the model, what we suggest is to apply model selection, which is a different concept. And to do that, what we need to do is to take our model and measure two things. One is parsimony, so how simple is our model according to Occam Fraser. And the second one is goodness of fit or model fitness. How close is our model to the evidence? So we have something, we need tools to do exactly this, both things at the same time, okay? This is the whole framework that, where I want to explain this presentation. So we took a case study that it's we were looking for a model that is already used. So we used the entropy maximization model. It's quite famous because, I mean, at least in the last 3-4 years, you got like 4-6 papers on archaeology using this model. It's a model designed to quantify the importance of a set of each site in a network of sites. So you have a region with some sites that could be settlements or other things. It doesn't matter. It didn't come from archaeology. And what you want to do is to quantify the importance of each site in the region. Okay? So as you can see here, there's 1, 2, 3. I mean, there are a lot of them. Most of them has one co-author that is Sir Alan Wilson, who is actually the person that created the algorithm, like I think 30 years ago. Okay? So it's a very well-known model that it's applied to a different case study. So we thought that it was a good case study, or a good model to use to explore this concept of model selection. To to briefly explain the algorithm, first of all, what you have is each site has an initial weight, and this initial weight usually is the intrinsic attractiveness of the place. So if you have water close to you, if you have a good prominence value, if you have defensive value, access to farmlands, or whatever you feel it's important, then the initial weight of the site will be higher than other sites. Then you run the system, and you start running the system, and what you do is you compute the energy flowing from each site to the rest of the sites, taking into account this weight and the cost of moving. Okay? So imagine that I'm a site, and I'm not very attractive. I have another one at 2 kilometers, and it's amazingly attractive. Probably all the trade, the people, the goods, everything will flow to the other side gradually. On the other hand, is the other attractive site is at 200 kilometers, probably the flow will not be as strong because there is a cost moving there. So probably some people will stay in my city because even if it's not that attractive, they don't want to move. So you do that, and what you do is you compute the sum of flows going and leaving every site, and you update the weights based on this. And what you do is you repeat this again and again until you get a system in equilibrium, meaning that the sizes of the cities, or let's say the energy on each site, is not exactly, it's not moving, it's more or less stable. To compute this energy going and leaving the sites, there are two different components. One is the content, which is this intrinsic interest of the site, and the other one is the context, is the place of the site in the network. Okay? The first one, it's controlled by a parameter called alpha, where what you have, it's basically you take the weight and you power it by the alpha. So if alpha is 1, you get the same weight you got at the beginning. If it's 100, you will get 100. If it's, okay. If it's less than 1, then even if the weight is 100, the real weight in the network of sites maybe will be 80 or 50. If it's more than 1, then what you get is that the weight is way more important than the real weight of the city. Then you have beta, that is controlling the decay of communication with distance. Imagine that you have one site that is that has a weight of 100, but it's a 5 days march from where you are. Okay? So if beta is very low, what you have is that there's no decay, so you move there without losing the weight. So let's say that the effect of the city on your city is quite high. If you start increasing beta, what happens is that this weight is less and less. So what you have is that if it's, for example, 0.5, what you got is that a site that is at 5 days and of movement and has a weight of 100 maybe has something like 25 weight against you. So you have all these two concepts, these two parameters, and let's say controlling the importance of content and context of each site. We applied that to Asia Minor, the Roman province of Asia Minor, where you have an amazing number of quite large cities that were urbanized gradually, okay? And they more or less were active at the same site, at the same period. So you see how most of them are in the western part, and they are 150, and they range from 1 to 230 hectares of size, more or less. And the interesting part is that there's a lack of work trying to understand the urbanization process of the whole province. So we wanted to understand if the content or the context was relevant to explain the dynamics of the province in terms of the success of each city that is in the data set. Okay? So we have this data set, we have a cost distance matrix that was calculated on land movement plus sea movement. So if you have a harbor and there's another one, obviously you will not follow the land route, you will go by sea. Okay? And the interesting thing is that the group forms a coherent complex system, meaning that if you do a frequency distribution of the sizes, you get a log normal distribution. This is more or less what you get with an autonomous system of cities. If you don't have a coherent system, what you would get is some gaps in the middle, or maybe there are no large cities or something like that. So it makes sense to take this region and use it as a, let's say, more or less closed system, which is what the entropy maximization model needs. And we had two questions. One is the content of costs that I am keeping repeating. The other one is the relevance of the sea trade, because the entropy maximization model has one main critique, which is that what about the edge effects? What about the energy flowing to the system from and to from outside the map, from outside the system? So we wanted to analyze also if C trade beyond the edge, for example, with Greece, was affecting, can affect the size of these cities. To do this, to analyze the system, we applied ABC, approximate Bayesian computation, using a particular algorithm called population Monte Carlo, so it's ABC PMC. And we use that with, it works this way. You get your parameters, we have 3, alpha and beta. Okay, they go from 0 to 2. It's all an informed prior distribution of more or less the value that will be around there. And then another one, which is a bonus to the initial weights of the sites with a maritime connection. What we do is we initialize the initial weights of each site at a uniformly random sample value between 0 and 100. If it's in the coast, if it's a harbor and you get a value, a parameter 5, then, I don't know, if it gets 10, instead of 10, it's 50. So it's quite easy. You get a bonus if you are a harbor. Then you run with these parameters and you compute the distance between the sizes of your cities, peer-to-peer. So each one, if it's 100 and in your simulation is 20, the distance is 18. You sum all these distances and you compare against the evidence. Okay? So you keep the top simulations, meaning the ones that are below some tolerance level that you set. With this, what you are getting is you are keeping all the parameters, okay, when the simulation is decent enough compared to the results, and you are just discarding the other ones. And these are more or less the results. For the alpha, okay, for each slide, in the left part, what you get is a sample from the uniform distribution, the prior distribution, so you can see more or less uniform values between 0 and 2. And on the right side, you have, for the same sample size, you have the posterior. So the values of the best simulations that you recorded in your analysis. As you can see, it's a unimodal distribution. It's a good thing that it's unimodal because it means probably that the ABC is working well, that you have enough tolerance your tolerance level is short enough to just keep the best ones. And then it's below 1. Okay, so if you remember, the weight is powered to the alpha. So if it's below 1, it means that you are actually penalizing in some way. So let's say the content is not especially important. It seems. Okay. Now we have to check the other values. So for the beta, you get an even higher peak. These are the density estimates of the posterior, by the way. So what you have is in the left, the prior. In the right, what you have is a huge peak at 0.01 or so. So it's a very low beta value, okay? You don't have anything beyond 0.2. So it's an extremely low value, meaning that the cost of moving is very low. And what you get, really, is an extreme local interaction between the cities. This is for the third parameter, the harbor bonus, what you get. So it's quite wide, but you have to take into account that in the end what you have is that the initial weights are samples from 0 to 100. So in the end, you are not parameterizing the initial weights of the cities. So it makes sense that it's wider. But in any case, it's between 2 and 7, more or less, and the average is around 5. Meaning that harbor cities are so the initial weight of harbor cities are more or less 5 times more important than if the city is not in the coast. If we take a look about the relation between parameters, the whole figure, okay, is the parameter space to explore. So it's the prior distribution, and the red dots are the ones in the, let's say, the top distributions, the posterior. If we take a zoom here, you see that more or less it's more or less a peak, and that the harbor bonus is evenly distributed around all of them. And usually you see that when alpha decreases, beta also decreases. But it's not that important. I think the important thing is that everything is quite narrow, and then you get a clear signal of the best result. So the discussion about this result, I think, is pretty clear that, at least in this case, because obviously this is different for every case study. I think it's a good thing that if you use another data set, probably you will get, for example, that alpha is way more important than beta. In this case, content is not extremely relevant. And trust me, because at the beginning we started the initial weights of the cities were not random. We used geographical properties classical from GIS analysis, such as prominence or access to farmlands. And the results, I mean, we started doing ABC with that. The problem is that the results we got were worse than random values. It was like, okay, so if we're using prominence or farmlands or whatever, we are getting worse results than if we just randomly choose the values. It was quite interesting. I think what it's telling here is that content is not really relevant, and that adding more parameters, it's penalizing the model because of parsimony. On the other hand, context is quite important in two aspects. One is the local communication that, as I told you, is extremely intensive because beta is almost 0. But the other thing is that this edge effect. It's extremely important, and it's this long-range trait that probably was adding energy to the system constantly. So if you take both of these things, that my question in general after this, and probably for new research is this the best model for studying site locations in archaeology? Because, I mean, if it's a criticism of the system, and of course you can extend the system to integrate that, but it's so important, and alpha does not seem to be extremely relevant, well, first, it's obvious that the base entropy maximization model is not the best suited for this, at least for this example. But second, there's a lot of GIS analysis, spatial analysis, that they choose one of the factors and they have an edge effect. So for example, you take the properties of each site, okay, and you analyze which one is better, etc., etc. The problem is that as we are seeing here, location is way more important. Location in the network seems way more important than the geographic properties of the cities. So obviously a model similar to this entropy maximization model where you have a nonlinear dynamic with, let's say, the geographical properties, but also the place in the network is the way to go. But probably we can find, let's say, extensions of the base model that are more suited for archaeological case studies. So to wrap up the presentation, one thing that I think it's relevant is this idea that the method presented here allows us to compare multiple explanations. If you think of a model not only as the code, the algorithm, but also as the parameters you use, you can actually here, for example, calculate the odds that you get these sizes for the cities with a high alpha against a low alpha. And this is also model selection, even if the code is the same. So if you do this, it's very interesting when you have a model with these different components that you can actually quantify which one is more important to explain the evidence. And the second thing is that I hope that this approach shows a very smooth transition or link between hypothesis definition, simulation or model, and the evidence. So it's a good way of going from one end to the other one of the let's say, of the research with a pretty decent algorithm, let's say, to get the evidence and the fitting of the model, etc., together. So I leave it here. Just one more thing. We are at the end of May. We have a workshop in Barcelona about all these things. So the title is "How Wrong Is My Model?" Empirical Challenges in Archaeology, History, and Anthropology. We are opening the field because we feel that we have similar problems. All these disciplines, also biology, but don't tell them because there are lots of them doing this kind of things. And we don't know. We don't want the place overcrowded with biologists. But in any case, the idea is to discuss all these problems of model-based archaeology against evidence and how can we solve it and fit the models and understand the problems. You have here the workshop, and obviously, well, if you have some experience that you want to share with us, this is the deadline, late April. And for more information, you can contact me or just write an email to the official mail address. So thank you.